Welcome to the Fortrea podcast. My name is John Kennett, part of the marketing team here at Fortrea. Despite 20 years in the industry, my passion remains high as I seem to learn something new every day about bringing new medicines to patients. This episode is the second in a series looking at how sustainability in clinical trials is relevant to the work we all do. What this series is not about is a discussion on solar panels and planting trees. While discussion on those elements has its place, we want to explore how thinking sustainably is positively impacting clinical trials for sponsors, CROs like ourselves, and ultimately for patients. During each of the episodes, we are bringing commentators from across the industry to explore attitudes and strategies to what is becoming an increasingly important topic to our industry. In episode 1, we focused on the big picture behind why the lens of sustainability is useful in driving efficiency in trials. In this episode, we turn our attention to partnerships, seeking to understand what it is going to take for us to develop a common language and common goals for sustainability in clinical trials across our industry. So with me today, we have Caleb Tuten. Caleb is Director for the Strategic Oversight and Execution of Public Benefit Corporation and ESG programs at Veeva and has been with the company for 3 years. Lisa Moneymaker. Lisa is a Senior Vice President at Medidata, a valued member of the leadership team there, and she leads the Strategic Customer Engagement Organization. And Fiona Adshead. Fiona is the chair of the Sustainable Healthcare Coalition. Her work and that of the coalition is to inspire partnership and action on sustainable healthcare. Her previous engagements read like a who's who of the industry, including Deputy Chief Medical Officer and Director General for the UK government, Director of Chronic Disease and Health Promotion at the World Health Organization, Bupa's Chief Wellbeing Officer, that must be a very interesting job, and ESG board roles at Fresenius, Migraine Labs, and Marks and Spencers, to name but a few. And from our side, we have Marlene Knupfer. Marlene is Instrument Translation Manager here for us at Fortrea, and today she appears to be competing with a blackbird in her garden who is trying to outsing her microphone. So if you hear some tweeting in the background, it's not Marlene on X. It's literally the blackbird in her garden. So thank you for joining us, everybody. I appreciate you being with us. And as I hinted at in the introduction, there's a lot of individual companies and organizations doing some great work here in sustainability in our industry. My first question to you all is, why is partnership even necessary here? What are the benefits of us going to be in having that? Fiona, I wonder whether I might start with you on that question.
Well, you're right. I mean, a lot of companies have done a lot of great things in this space. However, we need to go further and faster. And the reason why we should partner is because it's an economic way of using resources. It's much more efficient. So much of what we need to achieve is actually pre-competitive. And in fact, by sharing knowledge and skills together, we can go further. So all of those reasons mean that we need to do that. I think there's also something about where we are in the sustainability journey. And when we've got past the days of hero projects, we now, if we're really going to get to the scale of action that we need to tackle the climate crisis, we have just got to go at a faster pace. So it's about stepping up, and we need to change the system rules. We need to change the market. We need to change the way we look at things. So that's, for me, why we need to partner.
Thank you. Caleb, you're itching to contribute to that question.
No, I mean, I think Fiona said it really well there. I think just broadly, big problems need big collaboration, right? About climate change, I think that the UN chief famously said that climate change knows no national borders, and I would say similarly, sustainability across an industry cannot be a single company goal. Countries can't operate in a silo here. Industry certainly can't operate in a silo. We as individual companies can't operate in a silo if we truly expect and hope to solve a problem as momentous as climate change.
Lisa?
Yeah, I'd love to add one more, which is, it's a complex ecosystem that we work with in clinical trials, and there is no single company acting on its own through the entire life cycle. We have, the sponsors themselves, we have the CROs that support them, and then we have a myriad of technology companies that bring solutions to bear. And if any of us solved it or tried to solve it on our own, it would be leaving out 90% of the rest of that ecosystem. And so making sure that we're using common language and that we have common goals associated with them so that we're building towards that bigger solve, I think is a really exciting way for us all to partner.
Thank you. I mean, it strikes me from the responses you've given already on this that the risk here is chaos, muddled priorities, and an opportunity for us to lose sight of the benefit that true collaboration can bring here. I'm wondering what the panel is seeing in terms of emerging themes of sustainability goals in the industry. Are there certain thematic groupings coming to the fore that you're seeing? Fiona?
I think one of the trends that's really interesting is getting that order out of chaos, as you describe it. There are a lot of trends in sustainability around trying to create that common language that Lisa was talking about. How do we get those metrics, those measurement systems, so that we are all talking about the same thing? We know when we're succeeding. So, whether you're looking at the carbon footprint of medicines, or in our case, whether you're looking at the impact of clinical trials, our work on how you define a common method to look at the impact, then turn that into easily usable tools is at the heart. And so I think the metrics is one big element, and standardizing them. The second, I think, is working with the supply chain. So exactly as Lisa said, there's a big ecosystem, and particularly sponsors know that they need to work with their bigger supply chain. That's why in the Sustainable Markets Initiative, we produced our letter from 7 companies to their supply chains, asking them to help them with decarbonisation, because it's very much about how we work with everybody. Because you're absolutely right, Lisa, if we try to go alone, we're not going to get there. It has to be success for all.
Yes,
Yeah.
Lisa, yeah.
Yeah, well said. And I think, when we're looking at it holistically, there's so many different components of how we address the sustainability of any particular trial. Sometimes we're measuring everyone's individual, locations and the number of people driving to and from them to support that work. We're looking at what does it take to produce the drug or the device or the molecule. And then from the technology standpoint, I think there's a lot of new and exciting ways that we're contributing to be thinking about this around, can the technology that I'm bringing to bear reduce the footprint around how the trial is conducted? And the trial may be designed in a specific way that is to reduce it, but then additionally, if we can bring supply management into bear that makes sure we have just-in-time supply management, so there's less waste happening along with that. If we can look at monitoring solutions, that means fewer people are conducting visits. If we can do more decentralization with the patients, that means they're traveling less. There's so many different aspects to bring together. But if we're not coordinating those and thinking about those in the same way, like you said before, chaos. And I think additionally, we're taking a lot of time in creating these partnerships, in asking one another to measure up against a series of expectations. And I think that's a great driver, especially when we talk about sort of supplier or vendor responses into, sort of the main sponsor who might be doing procurement. But if we're not aligning on common language, it can create a lot of chaos and churn in something that has a wonderful goal and an output, which is, as a qualification of a supplier or a vendor, we want to make sure that you're aligned with our values. That's fantastic. But if we can't get alignment on what those values might be or the terminology we would use, we're wasting a lot of time, and time is additional resources too. And so I think making sure that we bring some order and standardization to that achieves a lot of those goals in a direct alignment.
That's an interesting point, Lisa. And you talk there about having expectations set and a common language set in amongst what is required as kind of a bedrock for us by way of collaboration. I'm wondering whether collaboration is impeded when different organizations have different values, and whether or not that does having different objectives prevent us from finding that common ground, or alternatively, and perhaps hopefully, we're seeing that by setting some of those differences aside and focusing on what needs to get done is actually driving that common goal is driving that forward.
I think it's more the latter from what I've seen, that just starting to put the stake in the sand is driving that common goal. And it's a little bit messy to start, and we, refine and we go back and forth with one another on what those expectations should be and what's reasonable and what are appropriate timelines for where we do have mismatches, what there might be remediations to associate those. But I think you have to start, and the start reveals where there may be discord, and the discord is generally not in the goal. We have the common goal. It's how do we get there, and how do we get there together? So I think, like you said, it's starting and then progressing from there.
Caleb, yeah, hi.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, and just to your idea around whether or not the differences in opinion or goals can impede. I think sometimes, and we see this whether it's sustainability or something else, if, as Lisa was saying, and Fiona too, if the right stake is in the ground and we're all looking in the right direction, sometimes those differing of opinions within collaboration is what creates, whether it's not friction, but that almost that impetus to solve the problems and being able to come together. And that's where then what collaboration really is not everybody just falling in line and moving in lockstep. It's communicating together, saying this is what we're working on, this is why we think it's important, what are you working on, why do you think that's important, and having those conversations to then be able to, because we don't know the roadmap yet, right? I mean, that's the whole idea is we see where we want to go, we don't know how to get there, and all of us kind of almost disagreeing along the way, I think is what's going to allow us to actually find those solutions, at least from an optimistic perspective.
So almost it kind of doesn't matter how we get there so long as we get there, and actually having that kind of diverse amount of input from different organizations and different perspectives is in some ways is the fuel which is driving that collaborative attitude forward. Fiona, I wonder whether you have anything to say on this. You've done a lot of work in the area of bringing people together and trying to find that collaborative zone. What are you seeing as kind of the keys to finding common ground here?
Well, I think what Lisa and Caleb have already said is absolutely right, that you have to have that overriding common purpose, why you're there. And I also think that everybody needs to get something different out of a partnership, and everybody has something different to bring. And I think exactly as Caleb was saying, it's that diversity that actually gives the spark for creativity and innovation. And actually, when you think about the purpose of a partnership, like what we've done to come up with a common method, actually, when you think about all the stakeholders we're going to have to engage next, the people in our partnership who may not agree all the time, may need different things from it, actually are pretty representative of the group of people we're then going to have to influence. So that makes it all the more powerful. And I think it's exactly as, we heard that it's about those open-minded conversations where we're really honest about what works, what doesn't work. It's about recognizing that, partnerships don't happen by accident. You need to resource them, you need to put time into them. You really do need to come up with that common problem statement of what you're trying to solve for after you've had your initial conversations. You have to be really committed and keeping to that North Star of what you're trying to achieve. And I think, finally, you need to recognize, as Caleb was saying, is that, particularly in this area, we've all got something new to learn. None of us comes with all the answers. It's really important that we recognize that, and that making it up together, learning by doing, having that experimental mindset and being action orientated is absolutely critical to being successful. And then, of course, the really important things is celebrating every success as you go along, because it's hard work. And I think you need to, it's building those relationships that really make, and it can be fun. It can be a roller coaster, but it can be fun.
And Fiona, you called it your common method, the methodology. Just in case other listeners, our listeners, are not familiar with what you're referring to, I wonder whether you could answer two things. Firstly, just a brief description of what that method is, but secondly, I'd be really interested to hear how long you think it has taken you to get from zero to published methodology there.
Well, I think from the initial, to answer that question first, to think from the initial conversation we had, it's been about 5 years. You know, actually aligning people with interests when people are ready to come into a partnership to talk together. What have we developed? We want the problem we set ourselves was how do you consistently measure the impact of clinical trials by taking a bottom up activity based approach. So you break a clinical trial into a patient visit to a trial, a blood test, whatever it happens to be, a chest x-ray. And then you have to agree what's in a trial, what your scope is, how you define activities. And what our method does is describe that for people. And then we've linked that with detailed guidance, which goes into a much more blow by blow account of how you do that. And then we've turned the database of values for each of those activities into an easily to use tool. So that's what we've done. But it takes a long time and you need to have patience. And I think that one of the things that people tend to forget is time is one of the most important dimensions of partnership. It takes people time because from the initial conversations we had with some of our companies who we now partner with, they just weren't ready to talk to us, even if they were doing work themselves. It was about coming around at the time when they were ready to talk to other people and they'd work things out for themselves. So it's being committed, but it just takes time.
Yeah, thank you. And it strikes me that uh, there's a fair bit here. There's lots of as organisations, what we're doing is we're seeking to solve a lot of the problems that we come across. We have to collaborate internally to do that, but increasingly, and this area for me has been the one area where I've seen it more than anywhere else, is there's a desire to have external collaboration, genuinely reaching across, right? That the climate emergency ain't going away and it affects us all, and as such, there is some similar sort of attitude, right? We want to get medicines to patients quicker. If that's our industry's overriding goal, then it fuels that collaborative spirit. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that we're kind of already starting to answer the question, but I just want to sort of dive in a bit more specifics. I'm curious as to what you see in terms of how the rubber is meeting the road. Um, Lisa, perhaps I can start with you on this. I'm looking for anecdotes, or not, as the case may be, on collaboration. Have there been really good examples that you've seen that have really kind of stand out for you?
Yeah, and you're right. Fiona did touch on a couple of these points and sort of how we engage in it, but we see that all of these sustainability efforts have an impact on our end users, and a big portion of our end users are ultimately patients and sites. And as the most impacted people, when we make changes around these and when we design our trials, the best experience for them is going to be when we can bring the most value to everyone that's involved. And we can think about sort of the less waste and the efficiency when we're saving time, as Fiona indicated. But we think that that better experience is also a key part of it. So we have a patient insights board at Medidata, and it's comprised of patient advocates, and they bring that patient experience directly into our software development lifecycle for how we're creating the technology solutions that eventually and ultimately impact the way that they experience the trial. And we've done that really in concert with companies as well when it comes to trial design and some of that feedback, because ultimately the fewer patients that drop out and the patients that we were able to best reach and retain within the trial create less waste within the trial itself. It moves things along faster. We're wasting less time. We're wasting less resources, re-recruiting and trying to re-enroll the trial. And the same thing for the sites. The sites as a key stakeholder who are working through this. We partner with them the same way in our Sites Insights program to make sure that they have a voice in how these technologies are coming into their world. We know that we're increasing the technology burden on them in the way that we bring technology to support trials. And we want to make sure that we're not creating undue burden in areas we can't see that's happening within their trial. And so we think that these engagement programs are a key way to making sure that we can have this broader sort of social impact as well as that footprint impact in the way the trials are designed and the technology is designed to suit them.
Thank you, Lisa. Caleb, I wonder whether you also have some perspectives from your from Veeva.
Yeah. I mean, obviously we're talking about sustainability here today, but I think solving question, this big is it, you can look to other really difficult, challenging problems and kind of use that as a model as well. So think about just new industry innovations, new product developments, breakthrough technologies, ideas, that kind of stuff along the way. I mean, that's what's going to be required to solve this, right? So those are often all the result of collaboration and idea sharing, right? So we at Veeva have a process for product development. We call it our early adopter model, which involves us just working really, really in close partnership with our partners, our customers, to develop products to solve really specific solutions. And I think, sort of like Lisa was saying, to make sure that it's not kind of us saying what needs to be solved, but actually working there, as you said, where Jacob, where the rubber meets the road. So granted, those are often, probably smaller, more focused problems than the far-reaching one here of sustainability in clinical trials broadly, but it's a success methodology that I think we could look to, right? And sustainability and climate change is such a huge problem, but it's about these incremental steps. And so, everything that we're trying to do has always been bringing efficiency and productivity to the life sciences industry, and kind of extending that efficiency, productivity, while also having kind of adding this extra layer, this extra lens. I think is the journey that we are, frankly, just embarking on now. So, it's an exciting place to be.
I hope you're enjoying this discussion, which we have broken up into two parts. Please continue listening in part two, where we will conclude our discussion on what it is going to take for us to develop a common language and common goals for sustainability in clinical trials.